And when she looked up from the infusion chair, the oncologist walking toward her wore the face of the man who had left her standing alone at the altar 6 months ago. The chemo ward smelled like antiseptic layered over something faintly metallic, and the fluorescent lights hummed at a frequency that made Claire's jaw tight. Chair by the window, third row, left side, because she could watch the oak tree outside instead of the IV pole dripping poison into her veins. The vinyl armrest was still warm from the previous patient, and she wiped it down with the sanitizing wipe the nurse had left on the side table. This was her second cycle. She knew the routine now. Arrive at 9 a.m., check in at the front desk where the receptionist always had 2 cheerful scrubs covered in cartoon puppies, get weighed, get her port accessed, wait for the doctor to sign off on today's cocktail. She'd brought her own blanket this time, soft gray fleece that didn't smell like hospital laundry, and a water bottle with a straw because her hands would start shaking around hour 3. What she didn't expect was him. Dr. Marcus Webb stopped 3 feet from her chair, clipboard in hand, white coat crisp over dark slacks. His hospital badge hung from a lanyard, the photo recent enough that she could see he'd kept the same haircut, short on the sides, slightly longer on top, the way she used to fix it with her fingers on Sunday mornings. Claire. His voice was steady, clinical. No surprise in it. Like he'd known all along. She felt the blanket slip from her lap. You're not my oncologist. Doctor, Patterson transferred his caseload last week. I'm covering his patients through the end of the year. He glanced at the chart. Stage 2A, BRCA1 positive, ACT protocol. You're on day 1 of cycle 2. Her port itched under the dressing. She wanted to stand, to walk out, but the saline drip was already running and her genetic counselor had been clear. This regimen, this timeline, this hospital, had the clinical trial she needed for the targeted therapy in phase 3. Switching facilities meant starting over, losing her slot, risking months. Marcus pulled the rolling stool closer and sat, elbows on his knees, the way he used to sit on the edge of her bed when they talked about wedding venues and honeymoon flights. I understand. But the trial coordinator is here and I'm the only oncologist certified to manage the protocol. If you want the PARP inhibitor trial after chemo, you need continuity of care. She stared at the IV pole. The bag of adriamycin hung like a threat, red as the dress she'd planned to wear to the rehearsal dinner. You left me standing in a wedding dress. I know. You didn't call. You didn't text. Your best man had to tell me you weren't coming. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. I know. The nurse appeared beside them, checking the tubing connection at Claire's port. Dr. Webb, her pre-meds. Do you want to start the drip? He stood, signed something on the tablet the nurse held out, then looked back at Claire. I can transfer you to County General. Dr. Okonkwo runs a similar trial there. But their next enrollment window opens in February, and your timeline starts now or my odds drop. Claire finished the sentence. She'd memorized the statistics. Every oncologist she'd consulted had said the same thing. The cancer was aggressive, hormone negative, triple negative markers lighting up her pathology like a Christmas tree. Delay. She pulled the blanket back over her knees. Start the drip. Marcus hesitated, then nodded to the nurse. The woman adjusted the flow rate, and the first slow push of poison began its crawl toward Claire's heart. He stayed beside the chair, watching the monitor, and she hated that his presence made her feel safer. By the 3rd hour, Claire's hands were shaking too hard to hold her phone. Marcus had left after the first 30 minutes, but he came back now with a heated blanket and a ginger ale, setting both on the tray table without asking. We need to establish some ground rules, he said, pulling the stool back to her side. You're going to see me every week for the next 12 weeks. Infusion days, blood work, scans, then surgery consult, then trial enrollment if you qualify. Claire sipped the ginger ale. It was flat, but cold, and it helped the metallic taste coating her tongue. Rules? Professional boundaries. He kept his voice low enough that I don't talk about what happened unless you bring it up first. I don't make excuses. I show up on time. I review your labs before every session, and I adjust your anti-nausea meds if the current dose isn't working. She looked at him directly for the first time since he'd sat down. His eyes were the same, dark brown with flecks of amber near the iris, but there were lines at the corners now, deeper than she remembered. And what do I do? You tell me the truth about your symptoms. You don't downplay the nausea or the fatigue because you think it makes you look weak. You call the after-hours line if you spike a fever over 100.4, and you don't skip appointments because you're angry at me. The blanket was warm against her chest, and she hated that it helped. I reserve the right to request a different doctor at any point. Agreed. And if I do, you don't fight it. You sign the transfer papers and you don't make it complicated. Marcus nodded. Agreed. She held out her hand, the one without the IV. Then we have a deal. He shook it, his palm warm and dry, the grip firm but not crushing. When he let go, she saw the thin line of pale skin on his left ring finger where a band used to sit. The following Tuesday, Claire was in the waiting room for her blood draw when an older woman in a floral headscarf leaned over and whispered, "Is that your husband?" Claire looked up. Marcus was standing at the nurse's station, pointing at something on a computer screen while a nurse nodded and typed. He wasn't looking their way. "No," Claire said. "Just my doctor." The woman smiled. "He's handsome, and he checked on you twice while you were reading that magazine." Claire glanced back at Marcus. He was walking toward the exam rooms now, white coat swaying as he moved. She hadn't noticed him watching. The phlebotomist called her name, and Claire stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder. As she passed the nurse's station, one of the younger nurses, Rachel according to her badge, was whispering to a colleague, "Dr. Webb never takes this much time with other patients. I saw him bring her ginger ale last week." Claire kept walking, but the words settled under her skin like the ache before a bruise. Inside the blood draw room, the phlebotomist wrapped the tourniquet around Claire's arm and tapped her vein. "You're Dr. Webb's patient, right?" "Yes." "He's one of the good ones. Rush doesn't talk down to you. Some of the other doctors." She shook her head and slid the needle in. "They forget we're people, not just case files." Claire watched the vial fill with dark red blood. "Has he been here long?" "About 4 months. Transferred from a hospital in Boston after some kind of family emergency." The phlebotomist switched vials. "He doesn't talk about it, but one of the admin staff said he left a big research position to come here, took a pay cut and everything." The tourniquet released and Claire pressed gauze to the puncture site. She wanted to ask more, but the door opened and Marcus stepped in, tablet in hand. "Claire, do you have a minute?" He glanced at the phlebotomist. "I need to go over her next scan schedule." The woman nodded and labeled the vials. Claire followed Marcus into the hallway, where he pulled up her chart on the tablet. "Your white count is lower than I'd like," he said. "I'm going to prescribe a booster shot you'll take the day after your next infusion. It'll help prevent infection, but it might make your bones ache for a day or two." Claire crossed her arms. "The phlebotomist said you transferred from Boston." Marcus didn't look up from the screen. "I did." "She said you left a research position." "That's correct." He signed something on the tablet, then met her eyes. "I needed a change." 4 months ago." "Yes." She did the math. 4 months ago was June. Thing had been scheduled for early May. "You came here after I made the worst decision of my life," Marcus said quietly. "And I'm not going to use your treatment as an opportunity to explain myself or ask for forgiveness. But yes, I left Boston because I couldn't stay in the same city where I'd hurt you." A patient shuffled past them, pulling an IV pole. Marcus stepped closer to the wall, giving them space. When the hallway was empty again, Claire said, "Why oncology?" "Because I'm good at it. And because people in this ward don't have the luxury of giving up." He handed her a printed prescription. "Take this to the pharmacy downstairs. They'll show you how to inject it." Then he walked away, and Claire was left holding a piece of paper with his signature at the bottom, the same looping handwriting that used to sign birthday cards and post-it notes on her bathroom mirror. The nausea hit on day 3 after her second infusion. Claire woke at 2 a.m. with her stomach churning, barely making it to the bathroom before she vomited bile into the toilet. She called the after-hours line at 2:47 a.m., her voice shaking as she told the answering service her patient ID number. Marcus called back at 2:52 a.m. How many times have you vomited? His voice was clear, awake, not groggy. 3 times in the last hour. I took the ondansetron like you said, but it's not helping. Okay, I'm calling in a different anti-nausea. It's a dissolvable tablet. You put it under your tongue. If you're still vomiting after 2 doses, I need you to go to the ER for IV fluids. Claire leaned against the bathroom wall, the tile cold through her t-shirt. I can't afford another ER bill. Then the medication needs to work. A pause. Do you have someone who can drive you to the pharmacy? My sister's out of town. I can get a rideshare. Don't. He was quiet for a moment and she heard the sound of keys jingling. I'm coming to pick you up. Text me your address. You don't have to. Claire, you can't keep anything down and you're dehydrated. You're not getting in a stranger's car at 3 in the morning. Text me the address. She did. 20 minutes later, his SUV pulled up outside her apartment building. Headlights cutting through. She'd managed to change into sweatpants and pull a hoodie over her t-shirt, but her hair was unwashed and she knew she looked as sick as she felt. Marcus didn't comment. He just opened the passenger door, waited while she buckled in, then drove to the pharmacy with the heat turned up because she was shivering. Inside the pharmacy, the overnight clerk knew him by name. Dr. Webb, picking up for a patient? Yes, the label and handed over a small bag. Marcus paid with his own card before Claire could reach for her wallet. I'll reimburse you, she said as they walked back to the car. Don't worry about it. I'm not your charity case. He stopped at the driver's side door, looking at her over the roof of the SUV. You're my patient, and I prescribed a medication your insurance doesn't cover until tomorrow because you need it tonight. That's not charity. That's me doing my job. Back in the car, he tore open the packet and handed her the dissolvable tablet. She placed it under her tongue, tasting mint and something chemical, and closed her eyes as it dissolved. Give it 15 minutes, Marcus said, starting the engine. If it doesn't help, we're going to the ER. He didn't take her home. Instead, he drove to a 24-hour diner 3 blocks from the hospital and parked in the lot. The lights are better, and if you need emergency care, we're 5 minutes away. Claire watched the neon sign flicker in the window, the diner wiping down tables and a man in a truck driver's uniform drinking coffee at the counter. You're supposed to have professional boundaries. I do. Marcus kept his hands on the steering wheel, but those boundaries don't include letting you vomit alone in your apartment at 3 in the morning when there's a medication that might help. The nausea was starting to ease, not gone, but blunted, like someone had turned down the volume on her stomach's rebellion. She sank back against the seat, pulling the hoodie tighter. Why did you leave? The question came out before she could stop it. The wedding. Why? Marcus stared through the windshield at the diner sign. Because I got scared. Of what? Of everything. The commitment, the permanence, the idea that I was responsible for your happiness for the rest of our lives. He turned to look at her, his face half-shadowed in the parking lot's sodium lights. And I handled it in the worst possible way. I didn't talk to you. I didn't ask for more time, his throat was tight. You could have told me you were scared. We could have postponed. I know, but I was 29 and stupid and convinced that if I was having doubts, it meant we were wrong for each other. He looked down at his hands. I spent the next 6 months realizing that doubt is normal. That fear doesn't mean failure. That the woman I left standing at the altar was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I'd thrown it away because I was too much of a coward to stay. The medication was working now. Claire's stomach had settled into something manageable, and the shaking in her hands had eased. You came to this hospital because of me. I came to this hospital because Boston felt like a cemetery of mistakes, and I needed to be somewhere I could do some good. Marcus met her eyes. Finding out you were Dr. Patterson's patient was an accident. But when I saw your name on his transfer list, I didn't ask someone because you deserve the best care available, and because I owed you that much to show up even when it's uncomfortable, even when you hate me. Claire wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I don't hate you. You should. Yeah, she said. I probably should. They sat in silence for another 10 minutes. When Claire was sure the nausea wasn't coming back, Marcus drove her home and walked her to her apartment door. He waited until she was inside, then texted her at 4:30 a.m. "If anything changes, call. I'll have my phone on." She didn't text back, but she saved the message. By the fourth infusion, Claire had lost most of her hair. She'd shaved it down to a buzz cut the week before, sitting on her bathroom floor with clippers while her sister held a mirror and cried. Now she wore a navy blue beanie to the hospital, soft cotton that didn't itch against her scalp. Marcus noticed immediately. He always did. "The beanie's a good choice," he said, reviewing her chart at the start of the session. "Some patients try wigs, but the synthetic fibers can irritate sensitive skin. I'm not wearing a wig." Claire adjusted the IV line in her port. "If people stare, they stare. They won't stare here." He signed off on her pre-meds. "Everyone in this ward knows what we're fighting." The infusion went smoothly for the first 2 hours. Then Claire's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw your ex at the hospital. Is he stalking you or just pathetic?" She stared at the screen. The text included a photo. Marcus in the hospital cafeteria, holding a coffee cup, looking at his phone. Someone had taken it without him knowing. "Everything okay?" Marcus was checking her vitals, his gaze on the monitor. Claire locked her later. Another text arrived. This one was from her former co-worker Jenna. "Just heard from Sarah that your ex is your doctor? That's insane. Do you want me to file a complaint?" Then another from her cousin. "Mom told me about the cancer and the wedding guy. Are you safe? Do you need me to come stay with you?" Claire's hands were shaking again, but not from the chemo. She looked up at Marcus. "Did you tell people about us? About what happened?" He frowned. "No, I haven't told anyone." "Then how does half the city know you're my oncologist and that you left me at the altar?" Marcus set down the tablet. "I don't know, but I'll find out." He left the infusion area and came back 15 minutes later, his jaw tight. One of the nurses posted something on social media. She thought she was being vague, but she included enough details that people connected the dots. "I've reported it to HR and she's been suspended pending investigation." Claire felt the anger rise in her chest, hot and sharp. "This is exactly what I didn't want. I came here to get treated, not to be someone's gossip." "I know. And I'm sorry." Marcus pulled the stool closer. "HR is taking this seriously. HIPAA violations are a fireable offense, but the damage is done. People know now." The woman in the chair beside Claire's leaned over. "Honey, ignore them. My daughter tried to tell me I should switch doctors when she found out mine was going through a divorce, like his personal life mattered more than his medical degree. You know what I told her? I told her to mind her own business." Claire managed a weak smile. "Thank you," woman nodded. "Besides, Dr. Webb's the reason I'm still here. He caught something on my scan that 3 other doctors missed. I don't care if he's got a messy past. He's got steady hands and a good eye." Marcus looked uncomfortable, but he didn't argue. He finished checking Claire's vitals, adjusted her anti-nausea drip, then stepped away to give her space. But an hour later, when Claire's phone kept buzzing with texts and messages, he came back with a solution. "I've asked the hospital's patient advocate to contact you. She can help you file a formal complaint about the privacy breach, and she'll also provide resources if you're feeling harassed." "I don't need resources. I need people to leave me alone." "I understand. But the advocate can also help you set boundaries with family and friends who might be overstepping." He handed her a business card. "Her name is Dr. Linda Ortiz. She's a licensed social worker, and she's helped a lot of my patients navigate difficult situations." Claire took the card. "Did you tell her about us?" "I told her that a staff member violated your privacy and that you're dealing with unwanted attention as a result. I didn't give her details beyond what's necessary for her to help you." Marcus met her eyes. "I know trust is hard right now, but I promise you, I'm not the one who broke your confidence." That night, Claire called Dr. Ortiz. The woman listened without judgment, asked pointed questions about what Claire needed, then sent a template email Claire could use to shut down nosy relatives and friends. It was firm, but polite, and it gave Claire her power back. When she texted Marcus to thank him, he replied, "You don't owe me thanks, but I'm glad it helped." She stared at the message for a long time before typing, "Why are you being so nice to me?" His response came 5 minutes later, "Because you're going through hell, and the least I can do is make sure the path is clear." The scan results came back on a Thursday. Claire was sitting in Marcus's office. Not an exam room, but his actual office, with the desk cluttered with medical journals and a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest oncologist," that she suspected was a gift from a patient. The monitor so she could see the images. The tumor's responding. It's shrunk by 42%. Claire stared at the before and after scans. The mass that had glowed white in the first image was smaller now, less defined. "That's good? That's excellent. It means the chemo is working and your chances of being a candidate for the clinical trial are significantly higher." He pulled up another screen. "Your blood work shows your white cells are recovering well between cycles. You're tolerating the treatment better than most patients." She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt the weight of the next 8 weeks pressing down on her chest. How much longer? 4 more infusions, then surgery, then radiation mapping, then, if you qualify, the trial. Marcus closed the scan images. "We're at the halfway point." Claire looked around his office. A diploma from Johns Hopkins, a stack of patient files on the credenza, and a small wooden box on the shelf beside a medical textbook. The box was old, the corners worn smooth. "What's in the box?" she asked. Marcus followed her gaze. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he stood, took the box down, and opened it on his desk. Inside was a watch. Men's, silver with a black leather band. The crystal. Beside it was a small photograph of a man in his 60s wearing a white coat standing in front of a hospital. "My father," Marcus said quietly. "He was an oncologist. He died of pancreatic cancer when I was in med school." Claire looked at the photograph. The resemblance was clear. Same dark eyes, same serious expression. "I'm sorry. He was diagnosed on a Tuesday and dead by Saturday. 4 days. Pancreatic doesn't give you time." Marcus picked up the watch, turning it over in his hands. "He wore this every day. When he got too sick to keep track of time, he gave it to me and told me to remember that every minute matters. For the patient and the doctor." "Is that why you became an oncologist?" "Partly. But also because I watched him fight for his patients until the very end. Even when he was dying, he was on the phone with colleagues, making sure his cases were transferred to doctors he trusted." Marcus set the watch back in the box. "The week before our wedding, I found out that one of my patients in Boston, a woman I'd been treating for 2 years, had a recurrence. Stage 4. I'd told her she was in remission. I'd celebrated with her family. And then the cancer came back and I felt like I'd failed her." Claire's throat tightened. "That's not your fault." "I know. Logically, I know. But emotionally, I felt like I'd promised her something I couldn't deliver, and then I thought about promising you forever, and all I could see were the ways I might fail you, the ways I might not be enough." He closed the box and met her eyes. "So I ran, because running felt safer than staying and proving myself right." She reached across the desk and touched the box. "Your father would have stayed." "Yes, he would have." Marcus's voice was rough. "He would have talked to you. He would have asked for help. He would have done 100 things I was too scared to do." Claire pulled her hand back. "You're doing those things now. Only because I have to, because you're here, and you need treatment, and I can't run from that." He looked at her directly. "But if I could go back to that morning and make a different choice, I would. I'd choose you. Every time." The office was quiet except for the hum of the computer and the distant sound of a PA system calling a doctor to the ER. Claire stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "I need to think, I understand." She was halfway to the door when she turned back. "Do you still have the watch because it reminds you to be better, or because it reminds you of what you lost?" Marcus looked down at the box. "Both." The next infusion fell on a Wednesday, and it rained. Not a light drizzle, but a heavy downpour that flooded the hospital parking lot and sent patients scurrying under umbrellas. Claire arrived soaked, her beanie dripping, her sneakers squelching on the tile floor. Marcus was waiting in the infusion area with a heated blanket and a towel. The meteorologist said light showers. The meteorologist lied. Claire peeled off her wet jacket and sat in her usual chair by the window. Outside, the oak tree's branches bent under the weight of the rain, leaves plastering themselves against the glass. He handed her the towel. Dry off. I'll get your pre-med started. But when the nurse came to access her port, she frowned. Dr. Webb, the site looks a little red. He leaned in. His fingers were gentle as he palpated the area, checking for swelling. Does this since yesterday? He pulled back, his expression serious. I'm ordering an ultrasound. If there's an infection starting, we need to catch it early. We might have to delay today's infusion. No. Claire sat up straighter. I'm already here. I'm ready. Just access it and start the drip. Claire, if the port is infected, pushing chemo through it could make you septic. That's a life-threatening complication. But if we delay, I fall behind schedule. You said timing matters. Marcus sat on the stool, eye level with her. Timing does matter, but staying alive matters more. We delay 1 week, we adjust the calendar, and we keep you safe. That's the only acceptable option. The tech was a woman in her 40s with efficient hands and a kind smile. She smeared gel on Claire's chest, positioned the wand over the port site, and studied the screen. I'm seeing a little fluid accumulation, she said, but no abscess. I'll send the images to Dr. Webb. Back in the infusion area, Marcus reviewed the images on his tablet. It's not infected yet, but it's inflamed. I'm prescribing a topical antibiotic and oral antibiotics for 5 days. We reschedule your infusion for next Wednesday, and in the meantime, you keep the site clean and dry. Claire felt tears prick her eyes. I just want this to be over. I know. Marcus set the tablet down and handed her a tissue. But we do this right or we don't do it at all. She wiped her eyes, hating the weakness. I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of being sick. I'm tired of... Her voice cracked. I'm tired of being scared. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he stood, walked to the supply cabinet, and came back with a small package. He handed it to her. Inside was a keychain, a simple silver circle with an engraving. 1 day at a time. My father gave this to one of his patients, Marcus said. She finished treatment, went into remission, and 20 years later she came back to thank him. She left this on his desk with a note that said she didn't need it anymore because she'd learned to live without counting days. He kept it as a reminder that the fight is worth it. Claire turned the keychain over in her hands. The metal was warm from Marcus's pocket. Why are you giving this to me? Because you need it more than I do right now. And because I want you to know. He hesitated, then continued, his voice steady. I want you to know that I'm here. Not just as your doctor, but as someone who cares whether you make it through this. Someone who's going to show up every week, every scan, every hard conversation until you're on the other side. She looked up at him. Rain streaked the window behind his head, and the fluorescent lights made his face look tired. You can't promise that. I can promise that I'll try. That I won't run this time. He met her eyes. And I can promise that when you ring the bell at the end of treatment, I'll be there to hear it. Claire closed her hand around the keychain, the engraving pressed into her palm. What if I don't make it? Then I'll have failed you twice and I'll have to live with that. Marcus's voice was rough. But I'm betting on you, Claire. I've seen your scans. I've seen your blood work. I've seen the way you show up even when you're exhausted and scared. You're going to make it. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the statistics and the odds and the genetic markers didn't matter as much as sheer stubborn will. Okay, I'll take the antibiotics, I'll rest, I'll come back next Wednesday. She slipped the keychain into her bag. But you have to promise me something. What? If I ring that bell, you have to tell me the truth about why you left. The whole truth. Not the version you think I want to hear. Marcus nodded slowly. Deal. The infection cleared, and Claire's fifth infusion went smoothly. But 3 days later, she got a call from her insurance company. The representative's voice was polite but firm. "Ms. Donovan, we've received a request for pre-authorization for the PARP inhibitor trial. Unfortunately, your policy doesn't cover experimental treatments." Claire sat down on her couch, her hands shaking. "My doctor said I was a candidate. He said this was my best option after chemo." "I understand. But the trial medication isn't FDA approved for your specific genetic profile. We can cover the standard follow-up protocol, but not the trial." "What's the cost if I pay out of pocket?" The representative paused. "Approximately $18,000 per month. The trial runs for 12 months. Claire did the math. $216,000. She had maybe $12,000 in savings, and her medical bills from chemo had already drained most of that. There has to be another option. You can appeal the decision, or you can apply for financial assistance through the drug manufacturer. I can send you the paperwork." Claire hung up and immediately called Marcus. He answered the trial. "They said it's experimental." Marcus swore softly. "I'll call them. There's a precedent for coverage. I've gotten approval for 3 other patients with your profile. They said it's not FDA approved for BRCA1. That's a technicality. The trial data shows efficacy across multiple genetic markers." He was typing something in the background. "Give me 2 hours. I'll escalate this to their medical review board." But 2 hours turned into 2 days and the answer didn't change. The insurance company's medical director called Marcus directly and left a voicemail that Claire listened to on speakerphone in his office. "Dr. Webb, I've reviewed Ms. Donovan's case. While I appreciate your clinical judgment, our policy is clear. We cannot authorize coverage for non-approved treatments. If you'd like to discuss alternative protocols, I'm available." Marcus deleted the voicemail and looked at Claire. "I'm appealing to the state insurance commissioner, but that process takes weeks." "I don't have weeks. The trial enrollment window closes in 3 weeks, and I need to be 8 weeks post-chemo to qualify." "I know." Marcus leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "There's one other option." "What?" "The drug manufacturer has a compassionate use program. If I can document that you're an exceptional candidate, and that standard treatment options are inadequate, they might provide the medication for free." Claire felt a flicker of hope. "How do I apply?" "I submit the paperwork, but it requires detailed documentation, your full medical history, genetic testing results, pathology reports, and a letter from me explaining why you're a unique case." He met her eyes. "And it requires proof that you can't afford the treatment otherwise. Bank statements, tax returns, proof of income." The hope flickered out. "So I have to prove I'm poor enough to deserve help. I know it's invasive. I know it's humiliating. But it's the only path forward if insurance won't budge." Claire stood, her bag slung over her shoulder. "I need to think about it." "Claire, I need time, Marcus." She left his office and drove home in silence. That night, she pulled out her bank statements and tax returns, spreading them across her kitchen table. Numbers were stark, barely enough to cover rent and utilities, let alone experimental cancer treatment. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "How's treatment going?" Claire stared at the message. She could tell her sister the truth, that she was 8 weeks into chemo, her hair was gone, and her only shot at long-term survival required her to beg a pharmaceutical company for mercy. Or she could lie and say everything was fine. She typed, "Making progress. Tired, but okay." Her sister replied, "Love you. Let me know if you need anything." Claire set the phone down and looked at the paperwork. Then she took a photo of her bank statement, attached it to an email, and sent it to Marcus with the subject line, "For the compassionate use application." His reply came 5 minutes later. "I'll start the paperwork tonight." The compassionate use application was denied. Marcus called her on a Friday afternoon, his voice tight. "Manufacturer said your case doesn't meet their criteria for exceptional need. They prioritized patients with more advanced disease." Claire was sitting in her apartment staring at the wall. "So I'm not sick enough to deserve help." That's not what they said. That's exactly what they said. She felt numb. "What are my options now?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Standard follow-up protocol. Hormone therapy if your markers shift. Close monitoring with scans every 3 months. It's not the trial, but it's still effective treatment. What are my odds without the trial? 72% the trial. 89%. 17 percentage points, measured in decimal places. I see. Claire, 72% is still good. Most patients aren't me. Her voice was sharper than she intended. Most patients didn't get left at the altar by the man who's now telling them their best option is off the table. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. Then Marcus said quietly, "You're right. And I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't change the numbers." "No, it doesn't." He paused. "Do you want me to transfer your case to Dr. Okonkwo? She's excellent, and she might have different ideas about—" "No, I'm staying with you. But I need some space to process this." "Understood. Call me if you need anything." Claire hung up and sat in the silence of her apartment. Outside, she could hear traffic and the distant sound of construction. Inside, everything felt hollow. Her phone buzzed with texts throughout the evening. Her sister asking how she was. Her friend from work inviting her to dinner. Her mother wanting to know when she'd visit. She ignored them all. At 11 p.m., there was a knock on her door. Claire considered not answering, but the knock came again, persistent but not aggressive. She opened the door. Marcus stood in the hallway, holding a paper bag from the Thai restaurant down the street. "You didn't answer your phone," he said. "And I know you haven't eaten because you never eat when you're upset. I don't want company." "I know. But you need food." He held out the bag. "Pad Thai, no peanuts, extra lime on the side, the way you used to order it." Claire took the bag. The smell of basil and fish sauce made her stomach growl despite everything. "You remember my order?" "I remember a lot of things." Marcus stayed in the hallway, not pushing to come inside. "I remember that you cry at animal shelter commercials. I remember that you organize your books by color because it makes you happy. I remember that when you're scared, you get quiet instead of loud." She looked at him, really looked at him. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Why are you here, Marcus?" "Because I failed you today. The application should have been approved. I should have made a better case. I should have—" "You did everything you could. It wasn't enough." Claire set the bag on the entry table. "You can't save everyone. Your father couldn't either." Marcus flinched. "I know. But you keep trying anyway, even when it costs you." He leaned against the doorframe. "Why?" "Because the alternative is giving up. And if I give up on you, then I prove that I was right to run 6 months ago, that I'm exactly the coward I thought I was." His voice broke. "I can't do that again, Claire. I can't fail you twice." She wanted to comfort him. She wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, that the system was broken and he was just one doctor trying to navigate impossible choices. But she was too tired, too angry, too scared. "You should go," she said quietly. Marcus nodded. He turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep fighting for you, even if you don't want me to." Then he was gone, and Claire was alone with her pad thai and her 72% odds. She ate in silence, tasting nothing. Then she pulled out her laptop and searched for clinical trials in other states. There had to be something, some other option, some other path. By 2 a.m., she'd found 3 possibilities. One in Texas, one in California, one in New York. All required relocation. All required months of treatment away from home. All required money she didn't have. She emailed Marcus the links with a single line. "Are any of these feasible?" He replied at 2:17 a.m., "Looking into them now. Don't lose hope." But hope felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. The next morning, Claire went for a walk. Were weak from chemo, but she forced herself to move. Down the street, past the coffee shop where she and Marcus used to meet before work, past the park where they'd had their first date. She ended up at the church where their wedding was supposed to happen. The doors were locked, but she could see through the window to the altar where she'd stood in her dress, holding a bouquet of white roses, waiting for a groom who never came. The memory was sharp enough to cut. A woman appeared beside her, older, maybe 70, with silver hair pulled back in a bun. "Were you married here?" "I was supposed to be," Claire said. "It didn't work out." The woman smiled gently. "I was married here 52 years ago. My husband died last spring." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. We had a good life." The woman looked through the window at the altar. "But I'll tell you a secret. On our wedding day, he was late. 30 minutes late. I stood at that altar convinced he'd changed his mind, that I'd been a fool to think he loved me. And then he burst through those doors, soaking wet because of the aisle, and kissed me before the priest could even start the ceremony." Claire turned to look at her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because sometimes people are late. Sometimes they're scared. Sometimes they make terrible decisions." The woman met her eyes. "Sometimes they show up anyway, even if it takes them longer than it should. What if they don't? Then you go on without them, and you build a life that's worth living, whether they're in it or not." The woman patted Claire's arm. "But you look like someone who's still deciding. So I'll say this. Give yourself permission to be angry. Give yourself permission to grieve. But don't give up on yourself, even if you've given up on him." The woman walked away, leaving Claire standing alone in front of the church. She stayed there for another 10 minutes, letting the morning sun warm her face, feeling the ache in her legs and the hollowness in her chest. Then she went home and called Marcus. "I'm not giving up," she said when he answered. "But I need you to be honest with me. What are my real chances without the trial?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "If the chemo worked as well as it appears to, if the surgery is clean, if radiation covers any residual cells, 72% is solid. You could live decades. But the 17% I'm losing, that's significant." "It is. So I'm making a choice. Lower odds or upheaval and expense." "Yes." Claire looked out her window at the oak tree in the courtyard. Its leaves were turning gold. "Okay, I choose to stay. I choose 72% in my own bed and the doctor who knows me well enough to bring pad thai at 11 p.m. She heard Marcus exhale. "Okay. But you have to promise me something." "What?" "You keep showing up. You don't run. You stay until I ring that bell, and then we figure out what happens next." "I promise," Marcus said. "I'm not going anywhere." Claire's 6th infusion was scheduled for the following Wednesday. Her beanie pulled low, her water bottle filled with ice. The infusion area was quieter than usual. Only 2 other patients, both reading magazines. Marcus was at the nurse's station, reviewing charts. When he saw Claire, he walked over, his expression serious. "We need to talk before we start today's session." "About what?" He gestured to his office. Claire followed, her stomach tight with anxiety. Inside, Marcus closed the door and pulled up something on his computer. "Yesterday, I received a call from Dr. Patricia Morrison. She's the medical director at North Star Pharmaceuticals, the company that manufactures the PARP inhibitor." Claire sat down slowly. "They already denied me." "They did. But Dr. Morrison called me personally to explain why." Marcus turned the screen toward her. "Your application was flagged because of something in your What? 3 years ago, you participated in a genetic screening study through your primary care physician. That study was sponsored by North Star as part of their research into BRCA mutations." He pulled up a document. "You signed a consent form allowing them to use your genetic data for future research." Claire stared at the screen. She vaguely remembered the study. Her doctor had recommended it as a precaution because of her family history. She'd filled out paperwork, given a blood sample, and received her results 6 weeks later. "I don't understand what this has to do with the trial." Marcus leaned forward. "When North Star reviewed your compassionate use application, they ran your genetic profile through their database. Your DNA signature matched a case study they'd been tracking for 3 years. A patient with a rare BRCA1 variant that responds exceptionally well to PARP inhibitors." "So I'm exceptional." "You're exactly the kind of patient their trial was designed for. But here's the complication. Because you participated in that original study, there's a contractual issue about whether you can be enrolled in the trial without additional consent from their legal department. Marcus pulled up an email. Dr. Morrison wants to rectify that. She's personally overriding the compassionate use denial and enrolling you in the trial under a special provision for prior research participants. Claire felt her heart hammering. Are you saying I'm approved? I'm saying you're more than approved. North Star is covering the full cost of the medication, all associated scans and blood work, and they're expediting your enrollment so you can start immediately after your final chemo infusion. He handed her a printed letter. This is Dr. Morrison's official notification. She apologized for the confusion and the delay. Claire read the letter twice, her hands shaking. The words swam on the page. Approved for enrollment. Full financial coverage. Exceptional candidate profile. Sincere apologies for administrative oversight. I don't understand. Why did it take so long to figure this out? Because the original study was conducted by your primary care physician's office, not by the hospital. The data was stored in a separate database, and when I submitted your compassionate use application, it didn't automatically flag the connection. Marcus pulled up another screen. But when Dr. Morrison reviewed your case personally, she recognized the genetic markers and traced them back to the original study. So you didn't know I was in that study? Not until yesterday. Your primary care records weren't transferred when you started treatment here because we were focused on oncology. He met her eyes. But once I knew, I called Dr. Morrison and walked her through your entire case, your chemo response, your surgical timeline, your genetic profile. She agreed that you're not just a good candidate, you're a perfect candidate. Claire set the letter down, her vision blurring with tears. I thought it was over. I thought I'd lost my chance. You didn't lose anything. The system failed you. But we found a way through. Marcus handed her a tissue. Dr. Morrison is sending a trial coordinator to meet with you next week. She'll go over the protocol, the timeline, and the informed consent. If you agree to the terms, you can start the trial 8 weeks after your final infusion. What are the terms? Standard trial protocol, monthly blood work, scans every 3 months, quality of life assessments, and you'll need to report any side effects within, so you take it at home. No more infusions. He pulled up a final document. And here's the most important part. North Star is also retroactively covering a portion of your chemo costs as part of the research study compensation. It won't erase your medical debt, but it'll reduce it significantly. Claire stared at the number on the screen. $15,000. Enough to clear her outstanding hospital bills and leave her with a small cushion for living expenses. This is real? It's real. Dr. Morrison Marcus closed the laptop. I know the last few weeks have been hell. I know you've had it, Claire. The trial, the treatment, all of it. You're going to make it. She wiped her eyes, laughing through the tears. How did you find Dr. Morrison's direct number? Marcus smiled slightly. I have a colleague who used to work at North Star. She connected me, and I may have been persistent. You harassed a pharmaceutical executive for me. I made my case firmly and professionally multiple times. He stood, offering her his hand. Now let's get today's infusion started so we can move you one step closer to ringing that bell. Claire took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. For the first time in weeks, the weight on her chest felt lighter. The final infusion fell on a cold November morning. Claire arrived at the hospital with her sister, her mother, and 2 friends from work. They'd insisted on coming, and for once, Claire didn't argue. The infusion area had been decorated. The nurses had strung up a banner that read, "Last chemo, you did it," and someone had brought balloons. The other patients clapped when Claire walked in, and she felt her throat tighten with emotion. Marcus was waiting by her chair, holding a small gift bag. For your last round, inside was a new water bottle, stainless steel, engraved with her name and the date. Thank you. You've earned it. He gestured to the chair. Ready? More than ready. The infusion went smoothly. Claire's friends kept her entertained with stories from work, Her sister showed her photos of her niece's school play, and her mother held her hand during the rough patches when the nausea rolled in. Halfway through the session, the hospital's CEO stopped by, a tall woman in a navy suit who introduced herself as Dr. Helen Vargas. Ms. Donovan, I wanted to personally apologize for the privacy breach that occurred several weeks ago. The nurse who violated your confidentiality has been terminated, and we've implemented additional HIPAA training for all staff. Claire nodded. I appreciate that. I also wanted to let you know that Dr. Webb has been an exemplary advocate for you throughout your treatment. He's gone above and beyond to ensure you receive the best possible care. Dr. Vargas glanced at Marcus. We're fortunate to have him on our team. Marcus looked uncomfortable, but he didn't argue. After Dr. Vargas left, Claire's friend Jenna leaned over and whispered, So that's the ex who left you at the altar? He doesn't look like a villain. He's not, Claire said quietly. He's just someone who made a mistake, a big mistake. Yeah, but he spent the last 6 months trying to make it right. When the final drop of chemo entered her IV, the nurses gathered around. One of them handed Claire a brass bell mounted on a wooden plaque. This is for patients who complete treatment. You ring it and everyone in the ward hears. It's a celebration. Claire took the bell, her hands steady. She looked around at the faces watching her. Her family, her friends, the other patients who'd become familiar over the weeks, the nurses who'd held her hand through the worst moments. And Marcus, standing slightly apart, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. She stood holding the bell high and rang it 3 times. The sound echoed through the infusion area, clear and bright. Everyone applauded. Her sister hugged her, her mother cried, the other patients smiled and nodded, understanding the weight of that moment. Marcus approached last. Congratulations, Claire. You did it. We did it, she corrected. I couldn't have made it through this without you. He looked like he wanted to say something, but her sister interrupted. We're taking Claire out for lunch to celebrate. You should come, Dr. Webb. Marcus glanced at Claire. I don't want to intrude. You're not intruding, Claire said. They went to a small Italian restaurant 3 blocks from the hospital. Claire ordered pasta with marinara sauce, the first meal in weeks that actually sounded good. Her friends told stories about her from before the diagnosis, reminding her of the person she'd been when her life wasn't dominated by treatment schedules and blood counts. Marcus sat at the far end of the table, mostly quiet, but Claire caught him smiling at some of the stories. Tiramisu with a candle stuck in the center. Everyone sang and Claire blew out the candle with a wish she didn't say aloud. After lunch, her family and friends headed home, but Claire lingered outside the restaurant with Marcus. Thank you for coming, she said. Thank you for inviting me. Marcus hesitated. You have surgery scheduled in 2 weeks. Dr. Chen is excellent. She's done hundreds of these procedures. I know. We met last week. Claire looked up at the sky. It was clear. The trial starts. What happens then? Then you live your life. You go back to work. You see your friends. You do all the things you put on hold while you were fighting cancer. And us? Marcus met her eyes. That's up to you. Claire pulled the keychain from her pocket, the one he'd given her weeks ago. 1 day at a time. I made a decision. What decision? I forgive you. The words came out steady, clear. I forgive you for leaving. I forgive you for being scared. I forgive you for making the worst decision of your life on the day that was supposed to be the best day of mine. Marcus's expression shifted, relief mixed with something that, Claire. But forgiving you doesn't mean I'm ready to trust you again. Not yet. She held up the keychain. You said you'd stay until I rang the bell. Well, I rang it. So now we figure out what comes next. Slowly. 1 day at a time. I can do that. Good. Because I'm not interested in grand gestures or dramatic confessions. I'm interested in consistency. I'm interested in someone who shows up, someone who brings pad thai at 11 p.m. and fights pharmaceutical executives and remembers how I like my lime on the side. Marcus smiled, small but genuine. I can do that too. Then let's start there. Claire pocketed the keychain. I have follow-up appointments for the next year. Scans, blood work, trial check-ins. You'll see a lot of me. I'm looking forward to it. They walked back to the hospital parking lot together. Not touching but not distant either. The space between them felt like possibility, fragile but real. 6 months later, Claire stood in Marcus's office for her final trial check-in. The scan images on his monitor showed clear margins, no recurrence, no suspicious shadows. Her blood work was perfect. Her genetic markers were stable. "You're officially in remission," Marcus said. "The trial worked. The surgery worked. Everything worked." Claire looked at the scans, still marveling at the absence of disease. "What are my odds now?" 91% 5-year survival rate. Better than the trial projection because your response was so strong. He closed the images and turned to face her. "You beat it, Claire." She'd grown her hair back, short and curly, darker than before, but hers. She'd gained back the weight she'd lost, returned to work part-time, started going to yoga classes her sister recommended. She felt like a person again, not just a patient. "Taking you off active treatment," Marcus continued. "You'll still need scans every 6 months for the next 2 years, then annually after that. But no more medications, no more side effects. You're free." Free. The word felt foreign and familiar at once. "What about you?" Claire asked. "What happens to your part in this?" Marcus smiled. "I become the doctor who sees you twice a year and celebrates every clear scan. And outside of these appointments," he paused, "outside of these appointments, I'd like to take you to dinner." "Is that allowed? Patient-doctor boundaries?" "You're no longer in active treatment. The boundaries shift." He pulled a business card from his desk drawer and handed it to her. "This is Dr. Patel's information. She's agreed to take over your follow-up care if you'd prefer a different oncologist for your surveillance scans." Claire looked at the card. "You're asking me to switch doctors so you can date me?" "I'm giving you the option. If you want to keep me as your doctor, I'll remain professional. But if you want to explore what this could be outside of the hospital..." He met her eyes. "I'd like that chance." She thought about the last 6 months, the way he'd shown up for every appointment, the way he'd celebrated every small victory, her first meal without nausea, her first day without fatigue, her first scan showing tumor shrinkage, the way he'd been steady when she was terrified, patient when she was angry, honest when she demanded truth. "I'll switch to Dr. Patel," Claire said, "on one condition." "What condition?" "We take this slow. I'm not interested in picking up where we left off before the wedding. I'm interested in starting fresh, getting to know each other again, building something new." Marcus nodded. "Slow works for me. It doesn't work out if we realize we're better as friends or better apart. We handle it like adults. No running, no ghosting, just honest conversation." "Agreed." He stood and offered his hand. "Dr. Patel will call you this week to schedule your next scan. And I'll call you Friday to see if you're free for dinner Saturday." Claire shook his hand, then surprised herself by pulling him into a hug. He hesitated for only a moment before wrapping his arms around her. "Careful, thank you," she said quietly. "For everything. For staying. For fighting. For showing up even when it was hard." "You made it easy," Marcus said. "You're the strongest person I know." She pulled back, smiling. "I learned from the best." 3 months later, Claire and Marcus went to the church where their wedding was supposed to happen. Not to get married, but to light a candle at the altar. A small ritual Marcus suggested to honor the ending of one chapter and the beginning of another. They stood side by side, watching the flame flicker in the quiet sanctuary. Claire thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Terrified, alone, convinced her life was ending. And she thought about the woman she was now. Scarred but whole, cautious but hopeful, learning to trust again. "Do you ever regret it?" Claire asked. "The way things happened?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I caused you. I regret the time we lost. But I don't regret where we ended up. Because I think we needed to break before we could build something real." Claire nodded. She understood that now. The cancer, the treatment, the slow rebuilding of trust. All of it had stripped away the fantasy of who they'd thought they were supposed to be and revealed who they actually were. Imperfect, flawed, human, but willing to try. "What would you have done?" she asked, "if you'd been me? If someone left you at the altar and then showed up as your doctor 6 months later?" Marcus smiled. "I would have run, or I would have demanded a different doctor. I certainly wouldn't have been as gracious as you were." "I wasn't gracious, maybe, but you stayed, and you gave me a chance I didn't deserve." He took her hand. "I won't waste it." They blew out the candle together, the smoke curling upward in the dim light. Then they walked out of the church hand in hand into the bright afternoon sun. Claire's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Patel. "Your latest scan is clear. See you in 6 months. Keep celebrating life." She showed Marcus the message, and he grinned. 6 months. That's a lifetime in cancer time. "And in trust time," Claire added. "Plenty of time to figure out what we're building." "One day at a time," Marcus said. "One day at a time," she agreed. Trust isn't rebuilt with grand gestures or dramatic apologies. It's rebuilt with consistent, ordinary acts of showing up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's hard, even when the outcome is uncertain. Healing takes time, forgiveness takes courage, and second chances are earned through steady presence, not promises. When someone shows you through their actions that they've changed, you have the power to choose whether to let them in. Slowly, carefully. What would you have done if you were in Claire's position? Would you have given Marcus a second chance, or would you have walked away? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to Infinite Stories for more emotional journeys about love, loss, and second chances. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thank you for being part of our community.